They say brevity is the soul of wit. And so, after writing a dozen different introductions to this video, discussing this or that aspect of the game or indeed the wider genre, I've decided to just simply and concisely state my thoughts. I think Phantasy Star II is one of the worst games I have ever played. In this video, or to be more accurate, this rant, I'm going to list all of the many ways in which I feel Phantasy Star II has wronged me, and why it's such a tragedy that my pig-headed stubbornness stops me from just calling quits on a game that I frankly hate. Some of these complaints will be of no surprise to someone familiar with the game, or indeed with older JRPGs in general, but I don't care. Originality is not my focus here. I just want to have an outlet with which I can shout about all of the many things that have plagued me for the last few weeks. And if this video comes out in a timely manner, will continue to plague me for several more. So, as of the time of writing this, I have produced around 5 hours' worth of Phantasy Star II episodes. I know, based on my Steam analytics, that I have spent more than twice that time in the game. So, where has all of that time gone? Well, to the ever-present grind, that's where. Progress in Phantasy Star II relies on your accumulation of 2 resources, XP and Meseta. I don't need to explain what XP is, and Meseta is the currency, but I do need to express just how miserly the game is with handing these necessary resources out. To be ready for the final dungeon of the first act of the game, Climate Troll, you need to get your party to around level 15 and deck them out in approximately, roughly, ceramic gear. This takes around 25,000 experience and costs around 13,000 Meseta for each character. Assuming you were appropriately leveled and equipped for the previous dungeon, Uzo Island, this will take you around 30 minutes per character. Not terrible, I suppose. But then remember that you have to do this for each of the 10 characters you will have unlocked by this point. You might argue that you could just go ahead and level up the party members you'll actually be using, but that's not an argument that really holds any water. Difficulty spikes mean that you need to get all of your members to a base level at the first opportunity, before they're too weak to deal with basic enemies and end up becoming unusable for the rest of the game. Not to mention that Phantasy Star II will open up new slots in your party at around this time. If the rest of your party is underleveled and under-equipped because you made the decision to only level up the ones actively on your team, you'll find yourself about to have a nasty and quite boring time grinding to buff them up at a later, even more dangerous point. Put it this way, there's a reason most re-releases and quality of life mods add a 4 times multiplier to XP and Meseta rates. So, you'll be spending at least half your time in-game repeating the same few enemy encounters over and over again to improve each of your party members. Seeing how much time you'll spend doing this, you'd hope it wouldn't be too much of a hassle getting into position for the most efficient grind. Unfortunately, it quickly becomes crystal clear that Phantasy Star II does not respect your time. The best place to grind at this pre-Climate Troll stage is Uzo Island. To get there, your best option is to teleport to the town of Kueri, from where you can use your jet scooter to get to Uzo. However, you need to buy your current level equipment, that is to say, ceramic gear, at the town of Piara, and so you can either have a lengthy trek overland from Uzo, or return to Kueri and sell out for another teleporter. You can buy your equipment in Piara, and then decide that character's actually reached the right level and needs to be replaced with the next underleveled party member. There is unfortunately no way to swap them out for someone else in that town. To do that, you need to teleport again to the starting city of Paseo, go to Rose House on the other side of the city, click through a lengthy dialogue sequence to completely reorder your party with this new lineup, before exiting and teleporting back to QRE. Of course, that's only in the hypothetical world where you manage to complete your grind without needing to return to a town to regain your TP, because that's then another round of travelling back and forth from Uzo to QRE. Lengthy grinds are always miserable, but at least most games have the decency to just let you get on with it. Phantasy Star II instead finds some little way to add on those extra few minutes at every step in the process just to get to a place where you can do some decent grinding. Though it's not like the travel times are all that are wasting your time. I've heard complaints that Phantasy Star II is too difficult, but at this early stage, I don't think it's too bad in that regard. You might lose once or twice if ill-prepared, I mean, I have, but there's nothing insurmountable so long as you're at the right level. The problem is that fights can easily snowball out of your favour if you don't react to danger quickly, even at the right level, which means you really want to be healing after taking any serious damage. Enemies are unfortunately just a little too quick, a little too tanky, and a little too strong to let you get through a fight unscathed, which means you'll be healing after every single random encounter. That means you have to contend with the slow and tedious process of handling Phantasy Star II's awful menu system. If you want to heal someone, expect it to take about 20 seconds, as you enter the techniques menu, select your healer, select your healing spell, and then select your target. Not too bad on its own, but if you need to use a healing technique multiple times, whether that be to completely heal a character or to slightly heal multiple characters, add on another 20 seconds for every single use of a spell. The game makes you go through the whole rigmarole every single time. You can't just select the same spell again. And the inventory system is similarly awful because every character has their own individual inventory. If you realize that you've left an important item in an unused character's inventory, you've swapped them out for someone else, for example, you better believe that you're going to need to teleport back to Paseo, go to your house, change your party lineup, transfer the item to another inventory, and then reset your lineup back to what you intended in the first place. Once again, a lack of multi-use menus or item stacks means that you need to individually go through the whole menu navigation for each individual item. Fine for key items, very annoying for healing supplies and other consumables. I can honestly see how individual inventories might be used in interesting ways. Perhaps the party is split up on occasion and this limits your supplies in an interesting and convenient way. But I can promise you that Phantasy Star II is not advanced enough to be that game. Instead, this just adds those extra few seconds of unnecessary time wasting to what you've grown to expect to be an intuitive and immediate interaction in literally any other RPG. But then, at the end of the day, perhaps all of this could be forgivable in a situation where the combat and dungeon crawling acts as a worthy payoff. But surprise, surprise, they are not. I'll make it clear that the dungeons are somewhat neutered by the advancement of the internet. Their reputation for being overly long and complex mazes is more than fair, and they were rightly panned at the time. But the fact that anyone can now pull out a map or a guide that connects the floors and labels the loot makes navigation fairly simple. I mean, they were doing it even at the time. It's completely acceptable to be doing that as the default nowadays. The only flaw that hasn't been neutralized by outside advancement is, unfortunately, the sheer size of each dungeon. Your movement speed in a dungeon is very slow, and so it can take 15 to 20 minutes to just walk through a dungeon, even without considering the high random encounter rate. That's 15 to 20 minutes just to walk from point A to point B, discounting any fight you might end up getting into. So, I suppose it's no surprise that, much like the XP and Meseta, the re-releases and mods usually add turbo speed options to make navigation take less time, be less infuriatingly long and tedious. Then, of course, those random encounters see you enter combat, and for a game as supposedly very difficult as Phantasy Star II, I was expecting a lot more from this. I mentioned the battles aren't very difficult a moment ago, at least at this point in the game, but now let me elaborate as to why I feel that is. You don't need to think about them. It sounds like this may change once you beat the first act, but at this current moment, the optimal strategy in most fights is to get every party member to attack, attack, attack. Techniques are only very rarely a better option, and you're always better off healing once a fight ends. Besides, most characters barely have any techniques, outside of a fireball that deals less damage than their basic attack, a basic heal, and then a quarter dozen other healing tools that are actively detrimental to the party composition. Because of this, even the toughest opponents ultimately come down to just being DPS checks, existing to see whether you've grinded enough to outpace their damage output. It ultimately doesn't surprise me that Phantasy Star ended up going down the path of the MMO, because the worst excesses of the combat design of that genre are already clearly visible here. And to hammer that final nail in the coffin, put on that final straw to break the camel's back, none of this has been in service of propelling you through an interesting storyline. After an initial hook involving recurring nightmares of climactic battles, the opening of Phantasy Star II has you aimlessly wander from dungeon to dungeon, with only the most important stops on your journey giving you any lines of dialogue. And I mean lines, I mean singular lines of dialogue. That is it. This is a game apparently known for being one of the first JRPGs to really go all in on the complex storylines and interconnected themes, now a staple of the genre, and yet the first 10 to 15 hours of the game has a script approximately 20 to 30 dialogue boxes long. To make the point clear, these sort of exchanges are not outstandingly well-written examples of multi-layered storytelling, where multitudes lie in each and every word you're hanging on to them. They are simplistic and functional to the point of being emotionless. They are the textual equivalent of unseasoned chicken and boiled rice, providing the most essential information without the vaguest semblance of flavour to be found. There is, at this point, no interesting world building, no establishment of character, no interpersonal dialogue to create a rapport between party members, no expansion on the missions given or the few sites seen, and nothing even approaching intrigue or drama. It is isolated plot beat after isolated plot beat, the barest skeleton of a narrative, the sort of thing you might expect a writer's room to come up with a day or two into the creative process when there's literally just post-it notes attached to a big whiteboard. You are being given a story at the end of the day. Events are happening, but it's more like a Wikipedia summary of a plot than a multifaceted and meaningful work of art. You never want to hear someone say that a game they recommend only gets good 15 hours in, but I think that's the only hope of Phantasy Star II ever becoming playable. Not that I'm exactly holding out hope of that ringing true here. This opening stretch has been miserable. Made me miserable. Made me consider what I'm doing with my time and this YouTube channel, and really broke my spirits as a result. I do plan on finishing it soon enough, going against the advice of friends, and I do plan to forge on with it after a short hiatus. But it has convinced me to change how I do these playthroughs in the future. Firstly, no more locking in the next playthrough at the end of the current one. If I test a game and realise it makes me profoundly miserable, then I don't want to force myself to play it out of obligation, especially if it comes on the heels of another game that I also quite hated. Secondly, I'm going to be a lot pickier with the older RPGs I choose to play. A lot of genres came out of the gate somewhat fully formed, so a modern gamer could enjoy even some of their earliest examples of a good title with little worry, but RPGs are clearly not a good example of that. They evidently took a long time to get out of that primitive, undercooked phase, and the sheer time investment makes it a lot less appealing to be explorative with that sort of era, even with the best of that era. Not many games can boast that they were so unbelievingly, mind-bendingly, obscenely tedious as to convince a guy to basically give up on the pioneering works of their genre so as not to bore himself into a stupor, but the oppressive Phantasy Star II now can. Well done! So, thank you all for watching. Please, don't play Phantasy Star II without large-scale quality of life mods and enhancements. Tune in for whatever comes next. For now, I hope you enjoyed the video. Ciao.